In recent hours, a development has captured considerable attention across financial markets, diplomatic channels, and the global aerospace industry. Reports suggesting that Canada has taken a firm and unexpected position affecting Boeing, one of the United States' most prominent industrial champions, have prompted serious discussions in Washington, including what some describe as an emergency level consultation among policymakers. While headlines often frame such moments in dramatic terms, it is important to step back and evaluate the situation with analytical clarity, institutional perspective, and an understanding of the broader economic landscape in which these events unfold. The relationship between the United States and Canada is one of the most integrated economic partnerships in the world. Our two countries share deeply intertwined supply chains, financial systems, and industrial ecosystems. Nowhere is this more evident than in advanced manufacturing sectors such as aerospace, where production networks cross borders and involve thousands of specialized suppliers, engineers, and skilled workers. When tensions emerge within such a tightly linked system, the implications extend well beyond a single company or contract. They can affect employment, capital investment decisions, currency markets, and the strategic positioning of industries that are essential to long-term economic growth. Boeing has long been not only a symbol of American industrial capability, but also a critical component of the global aviation infrastructure. Its aircraft support commercial travel, cargo logistics, and defense operations around the world. The company's supply chain spans numerous U.S. states and international partners, including Canada. Canadian aerospace firms contribute components, materials, and engineering expertise that ultimately feed into aircraft assembled in the United States. This interdependence underscores an important economic principle. Modern manufacturing is rarely confined within national borders. Instead, it operates within complex production ecosystems where policy decisions made in one country can ripple through multiple economies. When policymakers in Washington convene urgently to assess such developments, the purpose is not merely political reaction. Rather, it reflects the responsibility of government institutions to evaluate potential risks to economic stability, employment, and industrial competitiveness. The aerospace sector alone supports hundreds of thousands of jobs in the United States, both directly and indirectly. These positions range from highly specialized engineering roles to manufacturing technicians, logistics coordinators, and small business suppliers embedded throughout regional economies. Consequently, when reports suggest that a close ally may have taken an action perceived as disadvantageous to an American firm, particularly one as central to national industrial capacity as Boeing, there is a natural impulse within government to assess the strategic and economic implications carefully. Such analysis involves multiple agencies, including the Department of the Treasury, the Department of Commerce, the Office of the U.S. Trade Representative, and in certain cases, national security institutions as well. From a financial perspective, markets often react quickly to such news. Investors evaluate potential changes in contracts, regulatory environments, and geopolitical relationships. Aerospace companies are capital-intensive enterprises with long development cycles. Aircraft programs often span decades from design to full-scale production, and airlines typically place orders years in advance. Because of this, even a single government procurement decision or trade policy shift can influence revenue expectations, investment strategies, and employment forecasts across the entire industry. Yet it is equally important to recognize that moments of tension between allied economies are not uncommon in sectors characterized by high technological value and strategic importance. Aerospace, energy, semiconductors, and telecommunications have historically been areas where governments play a significant role in shaping market outcomes. Public procurement, research funding, export regulations, and industrial policy can all influence the competitive balance among firms operating within these sectors. Canada itself possesses a sophisticated aerospace industry. Companies based in Quebec, Ontario, and other provinces have established global reputations in aircraft design, avionics, and advanced materials. The presence of these capabilities means that Canada, like the United States, faces its own policy considerations regarding domestic industrial development, technological leadership, and employment opportunities for its workforce. When governments evaluate procurement or partnership decisions, they must balance international relationships with domestic economic priorities. This is where economic diplomacy becomes particularly important. The United States and Canada maintain structured mechanisms for resolving disputes and negotiating policy alignment. Agreements such as the United States-Mexico-Canada Agreement, USMCA, provide frameworks for addressing trade disagreements and ensuring that cross-border commerce remains stable and predictable. When tensions arise, these frameworks help prevent short-term disagreements from escalating into long-term disruptions. For policymakers in Washington, therefore, the key question is not simply whether a particular decision by Canada represents a setback for Boeing. Rather, the deeper issue is how such developments fit into the evolving global landscape of industrial competition. Over the past decade, aerospace markets have become increasingly competitive, with manufacturers in Europe, Asia, and emerging economies seeking to expand their presence. Governments worldwide are investing heavily in aviation technology, sustainable fuels, and next-generation aircraft design. This competitive environment means that maintaining the strength of the U.S. aerospace sector requires sustained attention to innovation, workforce development, and financial stability. Boeing's challenges in recent years, ranging from production delays to regulatory scrutiny, have already underscored the importance of rebuilding confidence in the company's engineering processes and safety culture. Government institutions, including regulators and economic policymakers, have worked to ensure that the company can move forward responsibly while preserving the integrity of the aviation system. At the same time, global economic conditions play a significant role in shaping aerospace demand. The recovery of international travel following the pandemic has gradually restored airline revenues and increased aircraft orders. However, airlines remain sensitive to fuel prices, interest rates, and geopolitical uncertainties. Financing large aircraft purchases often involves complex arrangements that depend on stable credit markets and predictable economic growth. From the perspective of the Treasury Department, maintaining financial stability during periods of uncertainty remains a central priority. Events that influence major industries can affect credit markets, corporate bond spreads, and investor sentiment. While a single procurement dispute is unlikely to destabilize financial markets on its own, policymakers monitor these situations carefully to ensure that broader economic confidence remains intact. In moments like this, it is essential to approach the situation with both realism and perspective. Economic partnerships as deep as the one between the United States and Canada are resilient. They have endured policy disagreements before and have consistently demonstrated the capacity for constructive resolution. The ultimate objective for both countries remains the same: sustaining economic growth, supporting high-quality jobs, and maintaining technological leadership in industries that shape the global economy. As discussions continue in Washington and Ottawa, policymakers will evaluate the facts carefully, engage through established diplomatic channels, and consider the long-term interests of both economies. The aerospace sector represents not only a significant source of employment and innovation, but also a symbol of what cooperative industrial development between allied nations can achieve. Understanding the broader economic context surrounding these developments allows us to move beyond sensational headlines and focus instead on the structural dynamics that truly shape outcomes in global industry. It is within that analytical framework that responsible economic policy must operate. To understand why the situation has drawn such immediate attention in Washington, it is helpful to consider how strategic industries function within the modern global economy. Aerospace manufacturing is not simply another commercial sector. It sits at the intersection of national security, advanced technology, international trade, and long-term industrial policy. Governments therefore tend to treat developments in this sector with a level of seriousness that may appear disproportionate when viewed purely through the lens of a single commercial transaction. When news emerges that a major procurement decision or policy shift may disadvantage a leading American manufacturer, policymakers must quickly assess several interconnected questions. First, what are the direct commercial implications? Second, how might the decision affect supply chains that involve firms and workers across multiple regions? And third, does the situation signal a broader shift in the competitive dynamics of the global aerospace industry? In the case of Boeing, these questions carry particular weight because of the company's role within the broader American industrial base. Boeing's operations span multiple states, supporting extensive networks of suppliers that include small precision manufacturers, materials science firms, and advanced electronics producers. Many of these businesses rely on long-term aerospace contracts to sustain investment in specialized equipment and highly skilled labor. As a result, changes in demand for aircraft or components can ripple through local economies in ways that are not always immediately visible in headline statistics. This is one reason why government institutions often move quickly to convene discussions when developments affecting major aerospace contracts arise. The objective is not necessarily to intervene in corporate decisions or bilateral negotiations. Rather, it is to ensure that policymakers possess a clear and comprehensive understanding of the potential economic consequences before they evolve into larger structural challenges. It is also important to recognize that aviation markets are shaped by an intricate combination of private sector decisions and public policy frameworks. Aircraft purchases by airlines typically involve financing structures that depend on export credit agencies, international lending institutions, and long-term leasing arrangements. Governments sometimes support these transactions through financing guarantees or regulatory cooperation designed to facilitate cross-border trade. When a procurement decision shifts unexpectedly, the implications may extend beyond a single manufacturer's order book. Financial institutions that participate in aircraft financing may reassess their exposure. Suppliers may reconsider production schedules and inventory levels. Even workforce planning decisions can be affected, particularly in regions where aerospace manufacturing constitutes a large share of local employment. From the perspective of economic policy, one of the central priorities is preserving the stability of these complex systems. Sudden disruptions can lead to uncertainty that affects investment decisions across an entire industry. That is why policymakers often emphasize transparency, dialogue, and adherence to established trade frameworks when addressing disagreements among allied economies. The United States and Canada have historically approached such challenges through structured consultation rather than confrontation. Our two countries share a long history of resolving trade disputes through negotiated solutions that respect both domestic policy objectives and the broader goal of maintaining open and stable markets. The aerospace sector has experienced its share of disagreements in the past, including disputes involving subsidies, procurement rules, and technology partnerships. Yet these issues have generally been addressed through formal mechanisms that allow both sides to present their concerns and work toward mutually acceptable outcomes. From a macroeconomic standpoint, it is also essential to consider how events like this intersect with broader trends in global economic policy. Over the past several years, governments around the world have placed renewed emphasis on industrial resilience and supply chain security. The pandemic revealed vulnerabilities in global production networks, prompting many countries to reassess how critical technologies and manufacturing capabilities are distributed across national borders. As a result, we are seeing a greater degree of strategic thinking around sectors such as semiconductors, renewable energy technologies, and aerospace. Governments are increasingly evaluating how domestic industries can remain competitive while still benefiting from international collaboration. This balancing act is complex, particularly when industries involve both commercial and strategic considerations. In the aerospace sector, technological leadership is closely tied to research investment, engineering talent, and long-term capital commitment. Developing a new commercial aircraft platform requires billions of dollars in research and development and often more than a decade of engineering work before the aircraft enters service. Because of this, companies must operate within policy environments that provide sufficient predictability to justify these enormous investments. For Boeing, recent years have been marked by significant efforts to stabilize production processes and restore confidence following a series of challenges that affected both regulatory oversight and public perception. The company has undertaken extensive internal reforms aimed at strengthening engineering governance and improving manufacturing quality control. These efforts are critical not only for Boeing itself, but also for the broader aviation ecosystem, which depends on rigorous safety standards and reliable production systems. Canada's role within that ecosystem should not be underestimated. Canadian aerospace firms contribute specialized technologies and components that are integrated into aircraft manufactured throughout North America. The industry supports tens of thousands of high-skilled jobs in Canada and represents one of the country's most globally competitive manufacturing sectors. Decisions made by Canadian policymakers therefore reflect not only international considerations, but also domestic priorities related to employment, innovation, and regional economic development. This context helps explain why developments involving Boeing and Canadian policy decisions quickly attract attention from both governments. What may appear externally as a bilateral disagreement often reflects deeper structural questions about how allied economies coordinate industrial strategy in a rapidly evolving global marketplace. Financial markets, meanwhile, tend to react with heightened sensitivity to uncertainty in sectors that involve large capital commitments and long production cycles. Aerospace manufacturers rely heavily on investor confidence to support research and development investments, infrastructure expansion, and workforce training programs. When headlines suggest potential disruptions, analysts and investors naturally seek clarity regarding the long-term implications. For policymakers, maintaining calm and providing accurate information becomes particularly important during such moments. Markets function best when participants have access to clear, credible assessments of economic conditions. Government institutions therefore aim to communicate in ways that reinforce stability rather than amplify speculation. This measured approach reflects a broader principle that has guided economic policy throughout my career. Sustainable growth depends on institutions that respond thoughtfully to emerging challenges rather than reacting impulsively to short-term developments. While headlines may emphasize dramatic narratives, responsible economic leadership requires careful analysis, engagement with stakeholders, and a commitment to long-term stability. In the coming days, discussions between U.S. and Canadian officials will likely focus on understanding the full context of the reported decision and evaluating whether adjustments or cooperative solutions may be possible. Such conversations are a routine part of managing complex economic relationships between allied nations. They allow both sides to clarify intentions, address concerns, and ensure that policy decisions do not inadvertently undermine the broader partnership that has benefited both economies for decades. Ultimately, the strength of the North American aerospace sector lies not in the success of any single company or contract, but in the collaborative ecosystem that spans borders, institutions, and industries. Preserving that ecosystem requires ongoing dialogue, mutual respect, and a shared commitment to economic policies that promote innovation, stability, and inclusive growth. It is within that framework that policymakers in Washington are approaching this situation, not as a moment of humiliation or confrontation, but as an opportunity to reaffirm the principles of cooperation and economic resilience that have long defined the relationship between the United States and Canada. As policymakers continue to evaluate the implications of this development, it is essential to place the discussion within the broader strategic evolution of the global aerospace market. Over the past 2 decades, aviation has transformed from a relatively concentrated industry dominated by a handful of manufacturers into a far more competitive and technologically dynamic sector. Governments and private investors across multiple regions have recognized that aerospace capabilities are closely tied to national innovation systems, export competitiveness, and long-term economic growth. In this environment, decisions involving aircraft procurement, supply chain partnerships, and industrial collaboration often carry significance beyond their immediate commercial value. They can signal shifting policy priorities, emerging technological alliances, or evolving strategies related to industrial self-sufficiency. For policymakers responsible for maintaining economic stability and competitiveness, interpreting these signals requires careful analysis rather than reactive judgment. One factor shaping these dynamics is the increasing emphasis on advanced manufacturing and technological sovereignty among major economies. The United States, the European Union, Canada, and several Asian nations have all implemented policies aimed at strengthening domestic capabilities in high-value industries. These strategies frequently involve investments in research institutions, workforce development initiatives, and public-private partnerships designed to accelerate innovation. Aerospace occupies a particularly prominent position within these initiatives because it integrates a wide range of advanced technologies, including composite materials, precision electronics, artificial intelligence-driven design tools, and increasingly sustainable propulsion systems. Aircraft manufacturers must continually invest in new engineering techniques and environmental performance improvements in order to remain competitive in a market where airlines are under growing pressure to reduce carbon emissions while maintaining profitability. This transition toward more sustainable aviation represents one of the most significant technological shifts the industry has faced in decades. Airlines, regulators, and manufacturers are exploring pathways that include sustainable aviation fuels, hybrid propulsion systems, and eventually hydrogen-powered aircraft. These innovations will require unprecedented collaboration across national research institutions, industrial suppliers, and regulatory bodies. Within this context, the relationship between Boeing and its international partners, including those in Canada, remains strategically important. Canadian firms possess deep expertise in areas such as flight simulation, landing gear systems, advanced materials, and regional aircraft design. These capabilities complement American strengths in large-scale aircraft assembly, avionics integration, and global distribution networks. Together, these complementary competencies have allowed North America to maintain a leadership role in global aviation. When tensions arise within such an interconnected ecosystem, the most constructive response is typically to focus on reinforcing the structural foundations that support long-term cooperation. That means maintaining open channels of communication between governments, ensuring that regulatory frameworks remain predictable, and supporting research partnerships that benefit both economies. It is also important to recognize that economic policy operates within an environment shaped by cyclical market forces. Aerospace demand tends to fluctuate with global economic conditions, including interest rates, fuel prices, and the pace of international travel. During periods of economic expansion, airlines often accelerate fleet modernization programs and place large aircraft orders. Conversely, during economic downturns, airlines may delay deliveries or renegotiate existing contracts in order to preserve liquidity. Recent years have presented a complex mixture of recovery and uncertainty for the aviation sector. The rebound in international travel following the pandemic has restored passenger volumes in many markets, yet airlines continue to manage higher financing costs and evolving environmental regulations. These factors influence purchasing decisions in ways that can shift the competitive landscape among manufacturers. From the standpoint of economic governance, one of our responsibilities is to ensure that such fluctuations do not undermine broader financial stability. Large industrial companies, including aerospace manufacturers, play a significant role in corporate credit markets and institutional investment portfolios. Pension funds, insurance companies, and asset managers hold substantial exposure to these firms through both equity and bond markets.